Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. Introduction. Imagine spending your entire life convinced that something is fundamentally wrong with you. Not just on a bad day, but as a constant, humming background noise. A quiet, toxic gas you're always breathing. You get a B on a test, and the voice says, "See? Not smart enough." You get into an argument with a friend, and it whispers, "You're too difficult. No one will ever truly love you." Now, picture a woman named Marilyn, sitting by her mother's bedside in her final hours. For days, her mother has been unconscious, her breathing shallow. Then, just before dawn, she suddenly opens her eyes. She looks right at her daughter, with a clarity that cuts through the fog of her illness, and she whispers, "You know, all my life I thought something was wrong with me." She shakes her head slightly, as if to say, "What a waste," and then she closes her eyes for the last time. That quiet, devastating confession is the starting point for our journey today. That feeling, that secret, painful belief that we are flawed, insufficient, and unworthy of love, is what clinical psychologist and meditation teacher Tara Brach calls the trance of unworthiness. For over 25 years, Brach has worked with thousands of people from all walks of life who are trapped in this trance. And in her landmark book, Radical Acceptance, she offers a way out. Not by fixing ourselves, not by becoming a better, shinier version of who we are, but by doing something that feels completely counterintuitive. By accepting ourselves. Absolutely and completely. This idea might sound simple, maybe even a little soft. But I promise you, by the end of our time together, you will understand that radical acceptance is one of the most courageous, powerful, and life-changing practices you can ever undertake. It's the key to unlocking a freedom you may have never thought possible, the freedom that comes from no longer being at war with yourself. So, let's begin. Book summary. Have you ever had one of those dreams where you're trying desperately to get somewhere? You're running up a hill, but your legs feel like they're stuck in molasses. Someone you love is in trouble, or something terrible is about to happen, and no matter how hard you try, you just can't get there. You feel completely alone, shadowed by this overwhelming fear of failure. That dream, that feeling of frantic, futile struggle, is what it's like to live inside the trance of unworthiness. It's a waking dream where we are the main character in a story that's already been written, and the plot is simple: you are not good enough, and you are falling short. This isn't just about having low self-esteem. It's a deep, primal fear. When we're caught in this trance, we can't see the truth of who we really are. We only see the flaws. We compare ourselves to an imaginary ideal, and we're always trying to make up for the difference. This constant striving creates so much of our suffering. For some, it shows up as addiction, to food, to alcohol, to work, to the approval of others. We try to fill an inner emptiness with something from the outside. For others, it's a quiet, gnawing anxiety or a persistent feeling of being separate from everyone else. We imagine we're living inside a transparent bubble that cuts us off from the world. We yearn to belong, but we feel like an outsider at the feast of life. The author, Tara Brach, knows this feeling intimately. In her 20s, she lived in a spiritual community, an ashram, for nearly 12 years. She woke up every day at 3:30 in the morning for yoga, meditation, and prayer. And for a few hours, she would feel blissful, at one with the universe. But by mid-morning, the old, familiar feelings of insecurity and selfishness would creep back in. She found herself judging others for not being disciplined enough, and then judging herself for being so judgmental. The playing field had changed from college to a spiritual community, but the game was still the same, striving to be a different, better person. It's a game that so many of us are taught to play from a very young age. Think about this story. A family is at a restaurant, and the waitress comes to take their order. The 5-year-old daughter pipes up, "I'll have a hot dog, French fries, and a Coke." Her father immediately cuts in. "Oh no, you won't. She'll have the meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and milk. But the waitress just smiles at the little girl and asks, "So, hon, what do you want on that hot dog?" When she walked away, the family sat in stunned silence. A moment later, the little girl's eyes were shining as she said, "She thinks I'm real." That little girl's feeling, of not being seen, of not being real, is where the trance of unworthiness begins. Many of us grew up feeling like we were on this planet to be the person our parents wanted us to be. Our value rested on making them proud. Our real feelings, our real desires, didn't seem to matter. We learned that to belong, we had to be different, we had to be better. We learned that certain parts of ourselves, our anger, our fear, our neediness, were unacceptable. These unacceptable parts don't just disappear. We push them down, hiding them away in what we can call our personal shadow. The shadow is made up of all the parts of ourselves we believe are unlovable. And we spend our lives running from it. There's an old folktale about a man who was so terrified of his own shadow that he tried to run away from it. The faster he ran, the faster the shadow followed. He ran and ran until he finally dropped dead of exhaustion. If only he had stepped into the shade of a tree and rested, his shadow would have vanished. We are that man. We run from our feelings of inadequacy by developing all sorts of strategies. We become our own worst critics, with a running commentary in our minds reminding us of our flaws. We focus on other people's faults to temporarily feel better about our own. We stay busy, filling every moment with activities so we don't have to feel the emptiness inside. We play it safe, avoiding risks so we can't fail. As Homer Simpson once wisely said, trying is the first step to failure. So we hold back from being truly intimate, from expressing our creativity, from saying what we really mean. The tragic irony is that all of these strategies just reinforce the trance. Every time we hide a part of ourselves, we confirm our belief that we are fundamentally flawed. We sink deeper and deeper into our own self-made prison. So, if running away only makes the prison walls thicker, how do we get out? This brings us to the heart of the book. The answer isn't to run faster. It's to stop running altogether. It's to practice what Tara Brach calls radical acceptance. Let's imagine a magnificent white tiger named Mohini. For years, she lived at the National Zoo in a tiny 12 by 12 foot cage with a concrete floor. She spent her days pacing back and forth, in that cramped space. Eventually, the zoo created a beautiful, natural habitat for her, covering several acres with hills, trees, and a pond. With great excitement, they released her into this expansive new home. But it was too late. The tiger immediately went to a corner of the new enclosure and spent the rest of her life pacing back and forth in an area of exactly 12 by 12 feet, until the grass was worn completely bare. Mohini's story is a heartbreaking metaphor for our own lives. Freedom is possible, yet we can spend our years trapped in the same old patterns of self-judgment and anxiety. We've grown so accustomed to our cage that we don't even see the open fields around us. Unlike Mohini, however, we can learn to recognize our cage. We can see how we are wasting our precious lives. And the way out begins with accepting everything about ourselves and our lives. Now, this is a really big idea, so let's be clear about what it means. Radical acceptance is not resignation. It's not saying, well, this is just the way I am, so I'll never change. It's not an excuse for bad habits or for passivity. In fact, the psychologist Carl Rogers discovered a fascinating paradox. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. Acceptance is the fertile ground from which genuine change can grow. So what is it, really? Radical acceptance is the practice of meeting our moment-to-moment experience with wakefulness and care, without trying to judge it, control it, or push it away. It's an inner process of saying yes to what is actually happening inside us. It means feeling our sorrow and pain without resisting. It means feeling desire or anger without judging ourselves for the feeling or being driven to act on it. Radical acceptance has two essential parts, and they work together like the two wings of a great bird. Without both, we can't fly. The first wing is mindfulness, or what we can call clear seeing. This is the quality of awareness that recognizes exactly what is happening in our inner world from moment to moment. When we're mindful of fear, for instance, we're aware that our thoughts are racing, our body is tight, and we feel an urge to run, and we see all of this without getting lost in it or trying to fix it. We're simply willing to be with the experience as it is. The second wing is compassion, which is our ability to meet what we see with tenderness and kindness. Instead of fighting our feelings of fear or grief, we embrace our pain the way a mother holds her crying child. Instead of judging our desire for another piece of chocolate, we can regard that feeling with gentleness. Compassion allows us to be intimate with our own life. These two wings are inseparable. If we only have mindfulness without compassion, we might clearly see our anger, but then we might start judging ourselves for being angry. We add a second layer of suffering. If we only have compassion without mindfulness, we might get lost in self-pity, creating a story about how we're a victim. Together, these two wings allow us to stay present with our experience, just as it is. And when we do that, something magical begins to happen. We start to feel freer. The grip of our old habits loosens. We see our lives with more clarity. But how do we begin? Especially when we're caught in a storm of emotion, how do we take that first step? The first step is what the author calls the sacred pause. Think about those highly trained Air Force pilots in the 1950s flying at altitudes higher than ever before. When their planes would start to tumble out of control, their instinct was to fight it, to frantically manipulate the controls. But the more they tried to correct the spin, the worse it got, and they would plunge to their deaths. Then, one pilot, Chuck Yeager, discovered the solution by accident. When his plane started tumbling, he was knocked unconscious. He plummeted for miles, but as the plane re-entered the denser atmosphere, it stabilized. He woke up and landed safely. The life-saving response, which went against all training and instinct, was to do nothing. To take your hands off the controls. In our own lives, when we feel out of control, our instinct is the same. We frantically try to manage what's happening. We get into an argument and we immediately strike back. We make a mistake and we scramble to cover it up. The sacred pause is our chance to intentionally take our hands off the controls. It's a suspension of activity, a temporary disengagement from our goals. We stop asking, "What do I do next?" We just stop. We discontinue whatever we're doing, thinking, talking, worrying, and for a moment, we become fully present and still. This simple act is revolutionary. By disrupting our habitual, automatic reactions, we create a space. And in that space, we can begin to see the wants and fears that are driving us. In that space, radical acceptance becomes possible. Let's look at how this works in a real-life struggle. A woman named Laura came to therapy because her marriage was on the verge of collapse. She felt that her husband, Phil, was constantly criticizing her. A simple comment about how she was driving could send her into a spiral of feeling completely incompetent. Her deep-seated shame would boil over into explosive rage. She would scream, throw things, and storm away. It was a pattern that had started in her childhood with her own volatile and critical mother. Laura's strategy for running from the shadow of her shame was to lash out. But this defense only made her feel even more out of control and more ashamed. It was a vicious cycle. Through her work with Tara Brach, Laura learned the art of pausing. When she felt that surge of rage or humiliation, instead of immediately reacting, she learned to stop. To turn her attention inward and just notice what she was experiencing. At first, it was terrifying. She was afraid that if she paused, she would just fall apart. But she kept practicing. In one session, Tara Brach asked her to imagine a recent fight. As Laura recalled the incident, her face began to burn and she felt a huge pressure in her chest, like it was going to explode. But instead of letting the explosion happen, she just stayed with the feeling. She paused. And in that pause, she was able to drop beneath the anger. She could feel the raw hurt and shame that were always underneath. The pause became her place of refuge, a concept in bullfighting called querencia. A bull in a fight can find a particular spot in the arena where it can go to reclaim its strength and power. When it finds its querencia, it loses its fear and becomes truly dangerous to the matador. For Laura, pausing was her querencia. By stopping and attending to her inner world, she was no longer a reactive victim of her emotions. She was tapping into her own power. One night, at a family dinner, her mother started in on her again with sharp, critical words. Laura's heart started pounding. She felt a searing heat in her chest. Everything in her wanted to scream. But instead, she paused. She took a few deep breaths. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, feeling the storm inside her body, the trembling, the shaking, the feeling that her chest was about to burst open. But she also heard a new voice inside her, whispering, "This feels horrible, and I can handle it." As she sat with the pain, something began to soften. The sharp hurt started to dissolve, and in its place, a deep sense of sorrow arose. And underneath that sorrow, a surprising warmth and kindness. When she looked over at her mother, she didn't see a monster. She saw a woman trapped in her own insecurity. Laura had faced the dragon, both in her mother and in herself. And by pausing, by not running, she discovered that underneath all the fire and scales was her own soft and kind heart. The pause is the gateway. But what do we do once we've stepped through it? How do we meet the difficult emotions we find there? This is where we learn to offer ourselves unconditional friendliness. Imagine the Buddha, on the morning of his enlightenment. He has just faced Mara, the embodiment of delusion, greed, and hatred. But Mara doesn't just give up and go away forever. He continues to make unexpected appearances throughout the Buddha's life. When Mara would show up, the Buddha's attendant, Ananda, would be alarmed. "The evil one has returned," he'd say. But the Buddha wouldn't try to drive him away. He would calmly acknowledge his presence, saying, "I see you, Mara." Then, he would invite him for tea. He would offer Mara a cushion and serve him as an honored guest. And after a while, Mara would leave, without having disturbed the Buddha's peace. When Mara visits us, in the form of fear, jealousy, anger, or shame, we can do the same. We can say, "I see you." We can recognize the reality of these difficult emotions without making them the enemy. We can offer them tea. This is the spirit of radical acceptance. One way to do this is through a simple practice of naming or noting. When a strong emotion arises, we can softly and gently name it with a mental whisper. Anger, anger. Fear, fear. Judging, judging. This isn't about pinning down the emotion or trying to get rid of it. It's a soft way of acknowledging what's here. It's like saying, "I see you, Mara." The moment we name our experience with this kind of gentle attention, it begins to lose its power over us. We are no longer possessed by the emotion. We are the one who is aware of it. Another powerful practice is simply saying yes. During a meditation retreat, Tara Brach found herself swamped in negativity. The weather was gloomy, her sinuses were bothering her, and the other meditators were annoying her. Nothing was right. Tired of fighting everything, she decided to try an experiment. Instead of resisting, she would agree to everything. She began to greet whatever arose in her mind with a silent yes. Yes to the pain in her leg. Yes to the blaming thoughts. Yes to the irritation. At first, the yes was mechanical. But even so, with each repetition, she felt something in her relax. Before long, her body and mind grew lighter and more open. The dark cloud of no was replaced by the expansive sky of yes, a sky that had room for everything, even her own grumpiness. Saying yes is an inner practice of allowing our thoughts and feelings to arise and pass away naturally. We're not approving of harmful behavior. We're not saying yes to being treated poorly. We are saying yes to the inner experience of anger, or hurt, or fear that is arising in this moment. The instant we agree to feel our vulnerability, we are holding our life with an unconditionally friendly heart. All of these practices, the pause, naming, saying yes, bring us back to the ground zero of our experience, our body. When we're lost in a story of right and wrong, as Tara was with her son, Narayan, over his homework and computer games, our reactivity lives in our body. Her anger was a mounting pressure in her chest. Her jaw was clenched. When we're caught in the trance, we're often completely disconnected from these physical sensations. We live from the neck up. But our emotions are not just ideas. They are visceral, physical experiences. Fear is a knot in the stomach. Shame is a burning in the face. Grief is an ache in the heart. By coming home to our body, by feeling these sensations directly, we can begin to untangle the knots of our reactivity. When Tara paused outside her son's door, instead of just barging in with anger, she felt the sensations in her body. The pressure of anger gave way to a deep soreness, a fist gripping her heart. Underneath the anger, she found fear, fear that her son would fail, fear that she was failing as a mother. And underneath the fear, she found grief, grief for the distance that had grown between them. By staying with the sensations, she let the emotional storm move through her. The stories of blame receded, and in their place, a tenderness arose. When she finally walked into his room, she was no longer an adversary. She was a mother, present and connected. The Buddha called mindfulness of the body the foundation of awakening, because it's at this ground level of sensation that we can free ourselves from the chain reactions that perpetuate our suffering. But what happens when the sensations are overwhelming? What happens when we are faced with our deepest fears? When a client named Barbara came to therapy, she was being haunted by frightening images from her childhood. As an infant, her drunk and angry father had dunked her head underwater. This deep, early trauma had left her living in a constant state of fear. As an adult, she was a capable and responsible person on the outside, but inside, she felt like she was always trying to lock a pack of wild dogs down in the cellar. Inevitably, they would break loose, and she would be flooded with anxiety and a paralyzing sense of dread. For Barbara, and for many of us, the path to healing fear begins with finding a sense of safety. Fear is fueled by isolation. When we feel alone with our fear, it feels unbearable. The first step is to recognize our connectedness with others. In therapy, just having another person witness her fear without judgment allowed Barbara to feel safe enough to begin exploring it. In Buddhist practice, this sense of safety and belonging is cultivated by taking refuge. We can take refuge in the Buddha, not as a god, but as a symbol of our own potential to awaken. We can take refuge in the Dharma, the teachings that guide us. And we can take refuge in the Sangha, the community of others who are on the same path. By remembering that we are not alone in our struggles, the stranglehold of fear begins to loosen. Once we feel a sense of safety, we can learn to meet fear directly. This doesn't mean we get lost in our fearful stories. The key is to move from the stories into immediate contact with the sensations of fear in our body, the squeezing, the trembling, the burning. This is what Tara Brach calls leaning into fear. Because our usual stance is to lean away from it, turning to face fear directly is a powerful correction. We are intentionally moving toward what we habitually resist. It can feel like, as one Zen teacher says, lying down on an icy couch. We want to hold back, because it feels like we might die of the pain. But if we can let ourselves feel the hard edges of fear, something amazing happens. A man named Eric, at a meditation retreat, was flooded with anxiety about his ill mother and his depressed wife. This anxiety triggered a traumatic memory from childhood. His baby brother had drowned, and he had always believed it was his fault. The pain was so immense that his body went numb, a familiar defense mechanism. But this time, Eric decided to lean in. He asked his fear, "How big are you?" Instantly, his terror exploded. It felt like it could fill the universe. He thought, "If I open to this, I'll be annihilated. But something deep inside him knew he had to let go. He surrendered. And in that moment of surrender, his body and mind felt like they were breaking apart. And then, silence. When the chaos subsided, his mind was absolutely still. The screaming cacophony had stopped. He was resting in a deep, vast, and indescribably tender silence. When we are no longer trying to control fear, our armor drops away. The other side of resisting fear is freedom. The energy that was bound up in fighting our experience is released into a love and awareness that is immeasurably large. This brings us to the ultimate realization on this path. As we learn to hold our own pain with compassion, we discover something profound. We become both the holder of our sorrows and the vulnerable one who is being held. This is beautifully illustrated by the story of Marion. Her adult daughter, Christy, revealed that she had been sexually abused for years by her stepfather, Marion's second husband. Marion was plunged into a nightmare of rage, guilt, and self-hatred. How could she have been so blind? She felt she deserved to suffer. She couldn't even imagine forgiving herself. At her lowest point, feeling suicidal, she sought counsel from an elderly priest. He took her hand and drew a small circle in her palm. "This," he said, "is where you are living. A place of deep, deep hurt. This cannot be avoided. Let it be." Then, he covered her whole hand with his. "But if you can," he continued, "try also to remember this. There is a greatness, a wholeness that is the kingdom of God, and in this merciful space, your immediate life can unfold. This pain is held always in God's love." In that moment, Marion felt a wave of compassion pour through her. She surrendered her desperation and felt held. She was still responsible for her part in her daughter's suffering, but she was no longer defined by it as an evil, worthless person. By feeling held, she could finally begin to find her own heart. And by finding her own heart, she was then able to hold her daughter with a new strength and compassion, allowing them to finally begin healing together. This journey, from the trance of unworthiness to the freedom of radical acceptance, is not about becoming a perfect, flawless person. It's about becoming a whole person. It's about recognizing our own basic goodness. Like Amy, who, after being betrayed by her husband, was drowning in shame and self-blame. Through the practice of forgiveness, she was able to drop beneath her stories of being a bad person and reconnect with the pain she was trying to avoid. And in doing so, she remembered her own goodness, the little girl who loved animals, the person who deeply cared about life. Trusting in her own goodness was what allowed her heart to soften enough to eventually forgive her husband and rebuild their relationship on a more honest foundation. We all have this basic goodness. The Dalai Lama says our fundamental human nature is one of gentleness. And we can see this in our own experience. When we are affectionate and kind, we feel good. It feels right. It feels like we are coming home to who we truly are. This home is our true nature. It is the pure, wakeful awareness that has been here all along, beneath the clouds of our stories and fears. It's what a legend from ancient India describes as the scent of the musk deer. A musk deer spent its entire life searching the world for the source of a mysterious, heavenly fragrance. He climbed mountains and crossed deserts, always following the scent. At the end of his life, exhausted, he collapsed. As he fell, his horn pierced his own belly, and suddenly the air was filled with a fragrance. He realized, in his dying moments, that the source of the scent he had been seeking all his life was emanating from within himself. We are that musk deer. We search for happiness, for peace, for love, as if it is somewhere else. But the path of radical acceptance teaches us to stop searching. It teaches us to turn our attention inward, and to meet whatever we find there with the two wings of a bird, clear seeing and a tender heart. By doing so, we discover that what we have been longing for is not a distant treasure. It is the very nature of our own heart and mind. It is the boundless love and awareness that is our birthright. It is already here. Commentary. As we come to the end of our exploration of radical acceptance, I want to take a moment to reflect on why this book is so profoundly important, especially right now. We live in a world that constantly feeds the trance of unworthiness. Every time you scroll through social media, you're met with carefully curated images of other people's perfect lives, perfect bodies, and perfect successes. The unspoken message is a constant comparison. You are not enough. You need to be thinner, richer, more productive, more popular. Our culture is a breeding ground for the feeling that something is wrong with me. What Tara Brach offers is not just another self-help technique. It's a radical shift in perspective. The idea that the path to freedom isn't through fixing ourselves, but through embracing ourselves, is revolutionary. It runs counter to everything we've been taught. We've been conditioned to believe that self-criticism is what motivates us to be better, that being hard on ourselves is a sign of high standards. But as this book so beautifully illustrates, that approach is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Self-judgment, shame, and fear only deepen the grooves of our suffering. They keep us trapped in our own small, invisible cages. The most powerful lesson for me in this book is the idea of compassion as a strength, not a weakness. Learning to hold our own pain with the tenderness we would offer a dear friend is an act of immense courage. It requires us to stop running, to turn around and face the very things we've spent our lives trying to avoid. But in doing so, as the stories of Laura, Eric, and Amy show us, we find not annihilation, but liberation. We discover a reservoir of kindness and wisdom within ourselves that we never knew we had. So, how can you start to bring this practice into your own life, right now? It doesn't require hours of meditation. It can start with something very small. First, for the next 24 hours, I invite you to practice the sacred pause. Just 3 times today, for 1 minute each time, stop what you're doing. It could be before you check your phone, before you eat a meal, or right after you get into your car. In that 1 minute, do nothing. Just close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and notice what's happening inside you. What sensations are in your body? What is your emotional weather like? Don't try to change anything. Just notice. That's it. This simple act is the beginning of waking up from the trance of busyness. Second, try experimenting with yes. The next time you feel a small wave of an uncomfortable emotion, irritation, anxiety, boredom, instead of immediately reaching for a distraction, just pause for a moment and silently whisper yes to the feeling. Yes to the tightness in your chest. Yes to the restless energy. This isn't about liking the feeling. It's about allowing it to be there. You might be surprised at how this simple act of allowing can create a sense of space and ease around the discomfort. These small practices are the seeds of radical acceptance. They are how we begin to befriend ourselves and our lives. This path is not about reaching some final state of perfect peace. It's about learning to walk through this messy, beautiful, unpredictable life with an open and gentle heart. It's about realizing that our imperfections are not a personal problem. They are a natural part of being human. And it's about discovering that the love and freedom we've been searching for have been right here, inside us, all along. That was a summary of Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. We've touched on some of the core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real journey happens when you decide to walk the path yourself. The true magic of a book like this is in the quiet moments when a particular story or a simple phrase resonates with you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is here to help you decide if this is a journey worth taking. If anything we've talked about has sparked something in you, I encourage you to get a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning new information, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and the world around you. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this exploration valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know that this work is making a difference, and it ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book. Let's continue to learn and grow together.